This is rush hour in Jakarta, Indonesia. A 10-kilometer drive here can turn into a 3-hour crawl. Every day, millions of commuters inch along at walking pace, starting and stopping 33,000 times a year on average. In the suffocating heat and smog, Jakarta's traffic isn't just bad, it's record-breakingly bad. By some measures, it's among the worst on the planet. For the people who call this megacity home, spending 3 to 4 hours stuck in traffic each day has become disturbingly normal. Jakarta's gridlock is so notorious that it's earned its own local term, macet, meaning jammed solid. And yet, behind these endless jams lies a deeper story. This is not just congestion, it's the result of decades of policy missteps. It's a crisis that costs Indonesia billions of dollars and affects tens of millions of lives every single day. Jakarta's traffic nightmare didn't happen overnight. It was years in the making. In this video, we'll uncover how urban planning failures, car-first policies, and explosive growth created a transportation catastrophe. More importantly, we'll see why this endless jam matters now. Jakarta's congestion isn't just a local headache. It's become a national emergency so severe that Indonesia is literally moving its capital city to escape it. Over the next 20 minutes, we'll break down how the city got here, the staggering economic and human toll of perpetual gridlock, and the radical measures underway to find a way out. This is not just a traffic jam, it's a cautionary tale of how policy, infrastructure, and urbanization can collide in all the wrong ways. By the end, you'll see why Jakarta's streets became so choked with concrete and cars, and what that means for cities everywhere. First, let's set the scene. Jakarta is one of Asia's great megacities, the bustling capital of Indonesia and home to roughly 10.5 million people in the city proper. Expand to its suburbs and commuter towns, the region known as Greater Jakarta or Jabodetabek, and the population swells to over 30 million residents. That makes Jakarta's metro area among the largest on Earth. Every weekday, around 20 million people travel across Greater Jakarta into the city's business districts. The result is absolute gridlock. How people get around in Jakarta is telling. Despite its size, Jakarta has historically lacked robust public transit. As of recent counts, only about 22% of commuters use public transportation, buses, trains, or the new metro. The vast majority, nearly 4 out of 5 people, rely on private vehicles, and indeed, cars and motorbikes outnumber people almost 2 to 1 in this city. Imagine that, significantly more vehicles than human beings in Jakarta. The streets are dominated by private cars, motorcycles, and ubiquitous motorbike taxis, with buses and trains carrying only a fraction of daily trips. The consequences are staggering. The average Jakartan can spend hundreds of hours a year trapped in traffic jams. One writer quipped that an average resident might spend 10 years of their life in traffic, and standing on Jakarta's clogged roads, you could believe it. During peak times, traffic moves at barely 10 to 15 kilometers per hour on major arteries, slower than a bicycle. All that stop and go means wasted fuel and lost time. Drivers here spend over a quarter of their travel time just idling. Studies estimate that the gridlock costs Jakarta's economy around $5 billion every year in lost productivity, fuel, and health damage. This isn't just an annoyance, it's a multi-billion-dollar drain, and it's literally toxic. Traffic is the single largest source of Jakarta's notorious air pollution. An estimated 70% of the city's smog comes from vehicle emissions. On bad days, Jakarta's air quality ranks among the worst globally, thanks in large part to exhaust from those millions of cars and motorbikes stuck in gridlock. The human cost, the stress, the lost time with family, the health impacts of pollution, is immeasurable. This is why Jakarta's traffic jam isn't just a local inconvenience, it's a full-blown crisis. To understand how it got this bad, we have to rewind a few decades. Jakarta's congestion nightmare was not inevitable. It was the result of specific choices and missed opportunities. The first part of this story is about how we got here, covering 3 key factors: a road-first development policy, a persistent lack of mass transit, and unchecked urban sprawl. These 3 threads intertwined to create the perfect traffic storm. For most of the late 20th century, Jakarta's growth strategy could be summed up as build more roads. As the city's population boomed, the government doubled down on highways and flyovers, betting that cars could carry Jakarta's future. The city prioritized development of road networks, most designed to accommodate private vehicles. A signature feature of Jakarta's layout today is its extensive toll road system, an inner ring road, an outer ring road, and 5 radial toll expressways that slice through the metropolis. Drive around Jakarta, and you'll inevitably end up on one of these elevated tollways or massive arterial roads. They were engineered to keep traffic flowing, at least in theory. For a while, these new highways did provide relief, but a phenomenon called induced demand hit hard. Each time Jakarta built a shiny new road or flyover, more cars flooded onto it within a few years, often bringing congestion back to square one. By the 1990s and 2000s, car ownership in Indonesia was exploding. Rising incomes in this nation of 260 million created a ballooning middle class, and with it, a surge in private vehicle ownership. Jakarta's roads filled up almost as fast as they were constructed. Essentially, build it, and they will drive. As one transport analyst put it, in a city with few alternatives, a vehicle-friendly culture took hold. Jakarta's urban design made driving the default. Even today, many neighborhoods lack proper sidewalks or bike lanes, reinforcing a reliance on cars and motorbikes for even short trips. Policies to manage traffic struggled to keep pace. In the mid-2000s, Jakarta tried a bold carpooling rule, the 3-in-1 policy, requiring at least 3 people per car on main roads during rush hour. But that spawned its own black market of jockeys for hire, essentially people, sometimes even children, who loitered roadside to hop into cars and boost the passenger count for a fee. The scheme was eventually scrapped in 2016, and traffic promptly got even worse, with average speeds on key corridors dropping from approximately 28 km per hour to 11 km per hour in the evening rush. A simpler odd-even license plate rule replaced it, allowing cars with odd or even plate numbers on alternating days. But enforcement is limited. The bottom line, Jakarta's approach heavily favored road expansion and car use, while demand for driving just kept growing. By building a city for cars without robust alternatives, Jakarta dug itself into a traffic hole. Contrast Jakarta with other megacities, and one thing jumps out: the absence of a comprehensive mass transit network. Until very recently, cities like Tokyo, Seoul, or Singapore spent the late 20th century building extensive urban rail systems, moving millions on subways and commuter trains. Jakarta, by comparison, lagged decades behind. In fact, until 2019, Jakarta was the largest megacity in the world without a metro or subway line. Proposals for a Jakarta metro had floated around since the 1980s, but they stalled for years due to political changes and funding issues. Meanwhile, the city ballooned in size, with no high-capacity rail to shoulder the load. The city did launch Transjakarta, a bus rapid transit (BRT) system, in 2004, which was innovative at the time. Transjakarta created dedicated bus lanes, the longest BRT network worldwide, and today carries around 1 million passengers daily, but even the busway couldn't stem the car tide, partly because it often got encroached by other vehicles and was limited in reach. By the mid-2010s, public transport mode share remained stuck around 20%, as we noted, far lower than many Asian peers. At long last, in March 2019, Jakarta's first mass rapid transit (MRT) line opened. This was a watershed moment. The new metro line stretches 16 kilometers north-south across the city, finally offering an alternative to sitting in traffic. It aims to cut travel time from South Jakarta to downtown from about 2 hours by car to just 30 minutes by train. And indeed, early ridership was enthusiastic. Commuters flocked to try the clean, air-conditioned trains gliding past the jams above. But one metro line is just a start. Even at full capacity of around 130,000 daily riders, the target for the first line, it's a drop in the bucket of Jakarta's daily 47.5 million trips. In fact, those 130,000 riders equal only about 10% of the passengers on the city's existing commuter rail network. Jakarta does have a decades-old commuter rail that connects far-flung suburbs, used by over 1 million people daily, but it primarily serves longer-distance commuters. The MRT has plans to expand. A second line is under construction to span east-west by 2029, and the city is also adding LRT, light rail lines, to connect neighborhoods. As of 2023, Jakarta even opened a new LRT, linking the city with suburbs like Bekasi, an attempt to emulate the transit networks of its neighbors. The city's administration boasts that public transport coverage has reached 86% of the city, thanks to new feeder buses and last-mile shuttles. Still, usage remains relatively low because decades were lost without rail transit. The missed opportunity is clear. While Tokyo's rail system carries tens of millions daily and keeps the metropolis moving, and Singapore built an MRT network spanning 200-plus kilometers by the 2020s, Jakarta entered the game very late. Those other cities also implemented policies to discourage driving, like expensive car ownership permits in Singapore or high parking fees in Tokyo. Jakarta, on the other hand, long subsidized fuel and kept car ownership costs accessible, so there was little deterrent to adding more vehicles. In short, Jakarta bet on roads over rails, and it's now paying the price. The third piece of the puzzle is Jakarta's urban form, how the city grew spatially. In a word, it sprawled. The Greater Jakarta region, often called Jabodetabek for Jakarta and its surrounding cities, expanded rapidly outward in the late 20th century. Housing developments, new towns, and industrial estates sprang up in what used to be rural fringes. Today, places like Bogor, 60 kilometers south, Depok, Tangerang, Bekasi, 25 kilometers east, are massive cities in their own right, each with populations in the millions. Yet every morning, huge numbers of their residents funnel into Jakarta for work. More than 3.5 million people commute into the capital each workday from these outer areas, mostly by car, motorbike or bus, since rail capacity is limited. Why this massive daily influx? In part because Jakarta's planning and land use policies did not effectively distribute jobs or affordable housing. The city's commercial and administrative heart remained concentrated in central Jakarta, home to the top offices, government buildings, and malls, while many workers found housing in cheaper, less dense outskirts. Zoning rules were either lax or unenforced, leading to a mix of high-rise business districts, but not enough residential units near them. Instead of building upward with transit-oriented development, Jakarta's growth often took the form of gated suburban communities and autocentric malls sprouting along highway corridors outside the city. People moved outward for larger homes or lower costs, but still had to drive back into the city core for work and amenities. The result is urban sprawl without efficient transport. A 2015 survey showed Greater Jakarta had 47.5 million trips per day, but astonishingly, only 2% of those were by public transport in the whole metro area. Why? Because many suburban areas simply aren't served by trains or quality buses. Only 44% of Jakarta residents live within convenient reach of a transit station, and in the suburbs that number is just 16%. In other words, the vast majority of people outside the city have no choice but to drive or ride a motorcycle to get anywhere. It's the classic vicious cycle. Sprawl creates long travel distances, which encourages car use, which then clogs the roads even more. Another startling fact: Jakarta was never meant to hold this many people. It was originally envisioned, back in Dutch colonial times, for about 500,000 residents. Now it's over 10 million, with 32 million in the metro, bursting far beyond its planned capacity. The city grew faster than infrastructure could keep up. From 1990 to 2000, Jakarta's population growth rate was among the fastest in Indonesia, pulling in migrants from across the archipelago seeking opportunities. But development elsewhere in the country lagged, so Java Island, where Jakarta sits, became home to 57% of Indonesia's population and an outsized share of its economy. Jakarta turned into a primate city, dominating the nation's commerce, and everyone flocked there, even if it meant a 2-hour commute each way. Summing up, Jakarta's traffic crisis is homemade. Years of road-focused investment encouraged car use, while mass transit arrived too slowly to offer an alternative. The city's sprawl and centralization of jobs force millions to travel long distances daily, mostly by car or bike. These factors fed on each other. More sprawl meant more cars justified more roads, and more roads enabled further sprawl. By the 2010s, Jakarta was locked in a gridlock spiral. But then, something began to change. A glimmer of hope on the horizon. In a movie, this is where our protagonists might catch a lucky break or have an epiphany. For Jakarta's traffic saga, The midpoint turn arrived in 2019 with the opening of the city's first MRT line. After decades of false starts, Jakarta finally got a piece of the modern transit puzzle that its neighbors had long enjoyed. And the response was immediate. Jakartans embraced the MRT enthusiastically. In the first year, ridership targets were met and often exceeded on busy days. Commuters reported saving an hour or more each direction by switching from road to rail. It was a small miracle to be able to bypass the traffic entirely by diving underground or riding above it on an elevated track. The MRT's launch brought a wave of optimism. City officials touted decreases in travel times along the MRT corridor and hoped it could start shifting the broader culture around commuting. Surveys showed that a significant chunk of MRT riders were previously car or motorcycle users, a positive sign that some drivers can be lured out of their cars if given a good alternative. For a brief moment, it seemed like Jakarta might finally be turning the corner on congestion, or at least preventing it from getting worse. But reality set in. One metro line cannot transform a city of 30 million overnight. The MRT Jakarta line currently covers only a single north-south slice of the metro area. Many commuters live and work far from its stations. So while it's been a success in its corridor, slashing commutes from South Jakarta to downtown, its overall impact on citywide traffic has been modest thus far. Jakarta still has only a skeleton of a transit network, one MRT line, approximately 16 kilometers, one small LRT line in the city, 5.8 kilometers being extended, a brand new regional LRT connecting some suburbs, 42 kilometers, the Trans-Jakarta BRT lines, and the existing commuter rail. Integration between these modes is improving, with transit hubs and a single payment card, but coverage remains incomplete. The government knows this is just the beginning. Plans call for expanding the MRT to at least 2 lines by 2030 and eventually a larger network, plus adding dozens more BRT routes and integrating feeder minibuses to bring passengers to trunk lines. Ambitiously, Jakarta's goal is to raise public transit usage from approximately 22% of trips today to 30% or more in the coming years. Governor officials claim that hitting a 30% modal share for transit would significantly reduce congestion, and they are pushing hard for that target. The 2019 MRT was a turning point in mindset, an admission that Jakarta cannot pave its way out of this problem. It signaled a pivot from car-first planning to a more balanced approach. However, as of now, the city is still grappling with jams nearly as bad as ever. In fact, global traffic rankings in 2022 to 2023 showed Jakarta still among the top 30 most congested cities worldwide. The turn has started, but the hardest part lies ahead. The next part will show just how heavy the consequences of inaction have been, strengthening the resolve to make sure this midpoint turn leads to real change. Jakarta's traffic isn't merely a daily nuisance, it's a full-blown crisis with serious consequences. In this part, we dive into the costs of this gridlock in 3 dimensions: the economic drain, the human and social toll, and the environmental impact. We'll also tackle a common counterpoint. Isn't traffic just a sign of a busy city? Other megacities have jams too. Yes, many big cities have congestion, but few on the scale of Jakarta relative to their infrastructure. We'll see how cities like Tokyo or Singapore, despite their size, avoided Jakarta's fate through different choices, underscoring why this matters. Jakarta's congestion exacts a massive financial cost. Studies by the Indonesian government and World Bank peg the annual economic losses from traffic at $5 to $6.5 billion. Think of that. Billions evaporating in wasted fuel, lost work hours, delivery delays, and health expenses. Commuters stuck in traffic aren't productive. Truckers burning diesel in jams raise logistics costs for businesses. One estimate put the cost at 100 trillion rupiah per year, about $6.5 billion, in 2017, and it has likely grown since. Companies in Jakarta must budget for freight taking unpredictable hours to get across town. Meetings start late because key people are stuck on the toll road. It's a drag on the whole economy. In fact, if Jakarta's traffic moved as efficiently as, say, Singapore's, Indonesia's GDP could potentially see a noticeable bump from the productivity gains. The congestion also deters investment. Foreign businesses cite Jakarta's infrastructure woes as a downside to setting up shop there. When a city's gridlock becomes world famous, or infamous, it can even affect tourism and events. People think twice about scheduling a conference in a city where you can miss your flight due to a permanent traffic jam. The numbers are big, but what about the everyday human experience? Jakarta's people pay with time off their lives. An average commuter might spend 2 to 4 hours a day in transit, time not spent with family, not spent resting, essentially lost. Over years, that adds up to thousands of hours of personal time gone. There's also the psychological stress. Navigating swarms of motorbikes, enduring heat and pollution, the mental fatigue of stop-and-go driving. Public health suffers. Studies link long commute times to higher stress, anxiety, even elevated blood pressure. And then there's road safety. Congested roads can paradoxically see many accidents, often involving motorcycles weaving through tight gaps. Jakarta's roads have a high rate of traffic collisions, and motorbike riders in particular face daily danger in the chaotic traffic mix. Furthermore, consider who bears the brunt. Often it's the lower-income commuters who have to travel furthest from the outskirts, or bus riders stuck in the same traffic as cars. Inequality is woven through the traffic crisis. Those who can afford to live near the center or have flexible work hours suffer less, while a factory worker from far-off Bekasi might spend half their waking hours commuting. The air quality angle is critical. On many days, a haze hangs over Jakarta's skyline. The city regularly ranks among the most polluted capitals, with fine particulate, PM 2.5 levels, well above WHO guidelines. Vehicle exhaust, especially from older diesel trucks and the armies of two-stroke motorbikes, is a main culprit. This pollution contributes to respiratory illnesses, which are prevalent here. Children growing up in Jakarta have higher rates of asthma. The carbon footprint is massive too. All those idling engines pump out CO2, making the city a significant greenhouse gas emitter. According to environmental data, if Jakarta's traffic could somehow be alleviated, carbon emissions could drop significantly. One estimate says by about 50% from transport. It's somewhat ironic. Indonesia has bold climate goals and vast forests acting as carbon sinks, yet its capital's congestion is a local climate offender. Another impact: noise. Constant honking and engine noise create an unhealthy urban soundscape, potentially affecting hearing and stress levels over time. So the consequences range from the macroeconomic down to the cellular level of Jakarta residents' lungs. Now, some might argue, big cities jam up. Look at Bangkok, Manila, Mumbai. Why single out Jakarta? It's true many developing megacities face traffic issues, but Jakarta's situation is extreme even among peers. For instance, Bangkok has serious congestion, yet it has built multiple urban rail lines that carry a substantial share of commuters. Tokyo is instructive. Greater Tokyo has 37 million people, even more than Jakarta. Yet Tokyo's congestion, by car, is relatively tame for its size. Why? Because the majority of Tokyo residents use public transit, not cars. Tokyo's extensive train-subway network moves over 40 million passengers per day, meaning far fewer cars compete on the roads. The result? A huge city that still flows. One metric compared. During peak hour, Jakarta drivers face delays of over 5 minutes per kilometer, whereas Los Angeles, often considered the car capital of the US, has delays of approximately 0.7 minutes per kilometer in comparison. Tokyo's car speeds remain reasonable because so many don't drive to work at all. The lesson is clear. Congestion isn't an unavoidable side effect of size. It's a result of choices. Tokyo, Seoul, Singapore chose early to invest in transit and limit cars, and they reap the benefits with efficient mobility. Jakarta did not, and it's reaping the whirlwind of that decision. The consequence of Jakarta's gridlock is ultimately a reduced quality of life and a city nearing a breaking point.